what is a walkthrough?
So a walkthrough is you with your buyer prior to closing, verifying information that is or isn't in the contract and the condition of the home.
I don't know how you explain it to customers. I usually tell them walkthroughs are for make sure a tree didn't fall on the roof or make sure the basement's, not flooded or, major things like that. But there is more to it also.
So the timetable between you writing a contract for a buyer and the time of a closing is on the average of what, 30 to 60 days? So a lot can happen in that time. Some houses you look at are vacant. A walkthrough is still necessary in my opinion. What's your ideal time frame when you're working with a buyer to do a walkthrough prior to close?
I typically do it the day before or the morning of closing. So if we're closing at 4 in the afternoon, maybe we do a walkthrough at noon, 10 in the morning, or the day before. It kind of depends on buyer's schedule also.
Right, which is a tough one. Mm-hmm. What's their work schedule? Maybe they have to drive 2 hours, so you can't do it. I always prefer to do the day before because if at all possible, especially if
ideal.
Buyer and seller are local, if the seller has to move out, you got to give them time to get everything out because they can move things out up until closing because it's still their property. If something were to come up, I don't like to do them 2 hours before the closing because if me and the other agent need to communicate about some issues that came up, then it delays closing and lenders are involved, title companies involved, and all that stuff is hard to schedule. Have you found anything on a walkthrough? Either was an issue or, you had questions on or things like that?
So we did a final walkthrough with some of my customers and the house was cleaned out. It was the day before closing. House was cleaned out. Garage was full of stuff. Like you walk in and you're like, we're closing tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Tomorrow. I went back just myself the next day before closing. The buyers couldn't make it with me. It was gone. Every screw was gone. And I was like, how did they even do that?
That's great though.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And they said, we'll get it out.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're not getting it out. You're not getting this out. And they did. They had everything cleaned out. The buyers were a little nervous, but we said contractually they need to get those things out. And they did. And it was amazing, So it went well, but it was kind of I don't know if this is going to happen. And it did.
Yeah. And on the rare occasion, I've had one instance where the walkthrough was done maybe 2 days before because of scheduling. I don't know that the seller was completely out at that time. Then the buyer goes to closing and after closing goes to move in and then you get the call.
No.
Oh my goodness, this is, the shelves are ripped off the wall or something else happened. That's kind of a tough one. There's been recommendations that and sometimes I have taken pictures when I do a walkthrough, if it looks like maybe they're moved out or something, because then I have something to compare it to if something were to happen in that time period.
For sure.
But that's one of the things we do is to protect a buyer because you don't want to have those questions later. Where's the refrigerator? Why is there a hole in this wall?
Where's the garage door openers? How do I access this?
There's 4 boats sitting in the backyard or, something like. One other thing I wanted to touch on, there was an instance, and it wasn't mine, but it's something to think about, like those portable storage sheds. In one case, a repo person came after closing and took the shed because either it wasn't written in the contract correctly or something, but it's one of the things we've talked about in our meetings, making sure that anything written into the contract has a clear title. Somebody isn't doing a rent to own on a greenhouse they put in their backyard and then all of a sudden it's gone.
Which is also really important of being specific. Like I have seen contracts where it's, included most furnishings. What does that mean?
Right.
Does that mean like a couch is staying or the entire house is staying? So it is really important to be precise and it's just helpful for everybody because then the seller and the buyer and the agents are all under the same understanding of this exactly is included or this is not included.
Another perfect example of why best to be represented by an agent as a buyer, because if you want to buy a house and just go to the listing agent, that agent can't guide you in make sure you have this, this, and this written down because they work for the seller. You want to be as detailed as possible. You wouldn't want to hire a home builder to build most of your house, right? So you don't want to do the same thing when you're purchasing one. Don't put vague language. It should be black and white, shall and must, and all those types of things. And I think that's one of the things we all do pretty good at.
Yeah. definitely. And I think too, not only for, liability of, is there something wrong with the house or something happened from the time we wrote the offer to closing, I use it also as part of like buyers being able to, I can envision myself in this house as mine now because we're closing tomorrow.
Right.
Things are cleared out. Like I use it as like a really like exciting event for my buyers
Absolutely.
because it's like, this is soon going to be your house. And now that things are kind of cleared out and there's not as much, furniture or personal property, they can kind of start to see more like, oh, we'll put the bed here or we'll put the couch here. And that's really when it gets exciting for me is like them starting to envision that as I'm like checking hot water and like fridge and everything and letting them kind of see the property as theirs.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that if those are things that you do, because I know when I go through a walkthrough, I might turn the central air on or the heat, one or the other, just to kick it on, make sure that I'm feeling warm air or cold air, run on a faucet until I hear like the well kick on or I get hot water, just a lot of those things because you can't answer those. If you don't get hot water and you go to closing and say, we couldn't get hot water. Oh, the breaker's off or whatever. Yeah. Oh, okay. Like a lot of things. And I don't think everybody does it. I've been with buyers who aren't thinking of all of that stuff. They're doing what you're doing, putting their furniture in their head where it's going to go.
Unpacking their boxes.
Right. And I'm like, I'm going to check the logistical stuff because I don't want you to call me in 4 hours to say, what do I do? This isn't happening or whatever. Any other scary stories you've had with a walkthrough?
No, I mean, I've had like little things happen. Like we had kind of a shower that had like a weird handle that you had to do something before. And we just turned it on like you would a normal handle and there's no water. And of course, I'm like, heart sink. We're closing soon. There's no water in the shower. So I text the other agent and then she got a hold of the seller and he said, do this, this, and this. And boom. Water. So there's just little, I mean, every home has little intricacies like that. And, or certain lights turn on outlets, certain lights turn on lights. So it's kind of nice to just walk through and have the buyers kind of know those things and not panic that something's wrong when really it's just a little bit different that it functions.
And I think I've had, and for my case, I've done all that, but I'm thinking of one case where the seller left a letter for the buyer that was like, we enjoyed this house for X amount of years or raised kids here. I hope you enjoy it kind of thing. And I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I have seen that sometimes and I think it's so cool. And I've seen sellers leave flowers for buyers and I've seen them leave beer in the fridge. I'm like,
well, that is a must. There should be a block of cheese and some beer in there, right?
It's so cool. That's what we do this for. Transactions like that where sellers have years of memories in houses and are just happy to turn it over to buyers to have their years of memories.
Because a transaction for a buyer and a seller can sometimes be that much of a deal.
Yeah.
And to other people that maybe have done it a lot, it can be kind of more of a transaction than a big purchase. And I think that's hitting it right on the head. So